The views and opinions expressed on America's Workforce Union podcast and its digital media channels are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the producers or sponsors.
Welcome to the America's Workforce Radio Podcast, the flagship production of the American Workers Radio and Podcast Network, where organized labor and its never-ending fight to protect the rights of the American worker come first. Now, presented by LIUNA, Laborers International Union of North America. Here's your host, Ed Flash Ferens.
Labor unrest at Hyundai in Korea, where workers want a piece of the profits and less robots. And there could be a strike next week. Today on the show, the latest from the American Legion and the Alliance for Retired Americans. Welcome to the Friday, June 19th edition of America's Workforce, where we're available on at least 5 platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. This being the third Friday of the month, we have Jeff Stoffer joining us on behalf of the American Legion, and he is going to be joined by Henry Howard, kind of changing the guard here. You know, Jeff has been with us since 2009, and he's going to be moving to Idaho to take care of his mom, his aging mom. She's well over 80 years of age. And Henry Howard will be joining us on the show today, and Henry will be our featured guest every month to talk about the current edition or the upcoming edition of the American Legion magazine. This will be the July edition. And of course, July 4th, 2026 is the 250th anniversary of the birth of the United States of America, and we're going to talk about that. I'll tell you, this July issue is packed. The Making of the American Mind. This is an article that Jeff did with the interview from an author, Matthew Spalding, and it's all about what the founding fathers were able to do to connect to so many different philosophies, theological and otherwise, into one declaration. It's amazing what's contained in the Declaration of Independence. We're also going to go back at that time because that was a scary time. A lot of the people that spoke out, I mean, they were looking to be executed if things didn't go the right way. Still a land of hope, the nation's story cannot be distorted by a penchant to lament its 250-year journey. This is an article by Wilfred McClay. And also, What Unites Us. This is authored by Alan Dowd. And Henry Howard is going to talk about this. We, the people, are not as divided as biased bloggers, television pundits, or social media posts would have us to believe. Yeah, we could do a whole show on the social media and how that's kind of confusing so many people. So Jeff Stoffer and Henry Howard on behalf of the American Legion. Later in the show, we're going to check in with Rich Fiesta. Rich is with the Alliance for Retired Americans, retiredamericans.org. And Rich is going to talk about the future of Social Security. Last week, the Social Security and Medicare trustees released their annual report, and they pointed out that full benefits and expenses will be paid until 2032. That's like 6 years away. After that, well, if nothing is done, we could see a reduction in benefits of around 22, maybe 23%. So this is a good news, bad news. We got money for now. The bad news, it's going to be reduced if nothing is done. So what is being done at this stage? Well, there's a couple of lawmakers speaking out saying, you know what, this can be fixed. Some want the retirement age to raise. Some are talking about scrapping the cap. Right now, I believe it's around $184,000 a year. You're making that amount of money. Beyond that, you don't pay into Social Security. That's 6.2%. Now, the employers pay also 6.2%. So what's going to happen? Well, it's all speculation right now. And the Alliance is doing everything possible to make sure that Congress does something. Retiredamericans.org is a website you want to go to. Now, a brief look into the world of labor. This segment brought to you by Boyd Watterson Asset Management. You can find more at boydwatterson.com. The workforce at the Hyundai Motor Plant in Korea is approaching a breaking point after a Labor Relations Commission ruled that the car maker must bargain directly with its in-house subcontractor unions. Now, this is significant. The decision comes as Hyundai Motors' primary union failed to reach an agreement with management in the latest talks, setting up a potential strike on June 25th. The union is demanding that 30% of Hyundai's net profits be paid to the workers as performance pay, and also has raised concerns about the recent deployment of robots on the production floor. The goal for the workers is to secure fixed wages regardless of working hours, given the risk that the introduction of these robots may reduce overtime and thus reduce worker compensation. Now, Hyundai's management claims that the robots will be deployed first in plants outside Korea, including the United States. But the union is not backing down from its position. So with the two sides so diametrically opposed, and the fact that both the primary union and the subcontractors unions are all bargaining simultaneously, a strike appears likely, and that could happen on June 25th. You know, if you get an opportunity, just Google a recent 60 Minutes episode on Hyundai and their use of robots that look like humans. I mean, they're doing somersaults. It's amazing what the technology has done with robotics, and they're going to use them as much as they can. Registered nurses at the KPC Health Orange County Global Medical Center, this would be in Santa Ana, California, have voted overwhelmingly to join the California Nurses Association, which is affiliated with National Nurses United. The vote was 91% in favor of joining the union. This is a 282-bed facility. The nurses there say they voted to join the union because it's critical that nurses have a say in making decisions to help recruit and retain experienced nurses, which, of course, leads to improved patient care. Nurses say they're struggling to provide care without appropriate staffing, working with often broken equipment, and are floated to units outside of their expertise. Right now, the California Nurses Association represents 550 nurses at the Orange County Global Medical Center. And you should know by now that Father's Day is this Sunday. So with that being the case, the personal finance company known as Wallet Hub has released its report on the best and worst states for working dads. I saw this important for our audience because we got a lot of workers, especially in the trades, especially in steel, making automobiles. You work hard and you expect to be paid appropriately for your work. Now, this analysis includes factors such as average workday length, childcare costs, and the percentage of men in good or better health. So what are the best states for working dads? Let's start off with number 1, Massachusetts, followed by Connecticut, District of Columbia, New Jersey, then Rhode Island, Minnesota, New Hampshire, Virginia, Vermont, and Washington. Most of them, mind you, are pro-union states. The worst states for working dads. Don't be surprised here. Many of them are right-to-work states. Number 42 on the list, South Carolina. 43, Arkansas. Then Arizona, Oklahoma, West Virginia, Alabama, Mississippi, Nevada, Louisiana. And the worst state for working dads, New Mexico. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to link up with the American Legion, talk about America at 250 years of age. Right after this on America's Workforce. Don't go away.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
It takes LiUNA to build North America's infrastructure. From roads and bridges to schools and skyscrapers, the men and women of LiUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, build the projects we depend on. From constructing the Freedom Tower on the site of the former World Trade Center to untangling Washington, D.C.'s congested interstate, LiUNA members do the work that matters. Find out what it takes to be built by LiUNA at liuna.org. That's liuna.org.
This segment of the show is brought to you by the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. For more information, please visit bmwe.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. You can find more at ifpte.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Ironworkers. You can find more at ironworkers.org.
There is unity and strength for workers.
We are the USW.
We are the USW.
The United Steelworkers.
The largest industrial union in North America.
We represent 850,000 members in the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean.
We work in metals,
rubber,
chemicals,
paper,
oil refining,
atomic energy, and the service sector.
We are steelworkers, standing strong and fighting for what's right.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Farrens.
And remember, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. Well, let's kick off the show right now with a longtime regular who is kind of passing the torch, so to speak, and that would be Jeff Stoffer. Jeff is with the American Legion, and we've had a long partnership with Jeff and the Legion going back to 2009. Now, we're still going to continue with the American Legion, but with somebody else. Jeff, welcome back to the show. Thanks for joining us. And I guess this is a pivotal point, too, because here we are celebrating the nation's 250th birthday. Why don't you explain what's going to happen here in the next month or so, okay?
After many years at the American Legion, actually 26 years at the American Legion, I'll be breaking camp and heading west to live in proximity to my mother, who is getting up there, and I kind of want to keep her in her home as long as possible. And I've spent the last 30 years trying to be a good dad, and I'm going to spend the next rest of my life trying to be a good son. So those are the only jobs I've known how to do very well. It's half exciting, half terrifying.
Well, you have done you've done a great job here on the show. I appreciate that. And we're going to hear from Henry in a little bit. Henry's standing by, kind of learning the ropes here on America's Workforce. So let's just plow right into the July edition. You've been working on this for a long time, and the stories, of course, are very, very compelling. So let's just start off with the 250th anniversary edition. Go ahead.
Well, Flash, what we wanted to do for the July issue of the American Legion magazine was really do a pretty deep dive into the founding values of America and the founding principles, since it is the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. We chose to really work through that. And, I read the book, The Making of the American Mind, and did a Q&A with the author, Dr. Matthew Spalding, that kind of explores sort of how it was that the Declaration of Independence became this pivotal sort of mission statement for the nation, for a nation that was very much in peril when they drafted it and then when they approved it. It is an absolute miracle in global government that these concepts became codified in the Declaration of Independence. And that is the trigger for everything that would happen going forward in America up to today.
We are still the land of hope. Let's talk about that. I think this is pretty fascinating. The nation's story cannot be distorted by a penchant to lament its 250-year journey. There's a lot of people that, they don't like what America has become over the years. This is a conversation that we could talk about for a long time. But you want to stay positive. You want to celebrate the moment. Talk to me about this.
Land of Hope was by Wilfred McClay, and he has this book is very unique in that it is not a lamentation, as he puts it, or a moment of atonement. He is a member of the Semi-Quincentennial Commission. Remember the operative word. Semi-quincentennial is this year's word of the year. Wilfred McClay wrote a book, and it's in multiple editions, and it has a classroom version of it that tells the story of the history of America, acknowledging the hurdles and the faults and the issues that have befallen our nation, that continues to revolve around this message that it is, in fact, remains, and always was, a land of hope. From the time that the Norse explorers came to the New World to try to find a place that was going to be fruitful and economically prosperous, to the Europeans who came over to escape religious persecution. This was an opportunity to restart and everything like that. And in both The Making of the American Mind by Dr. Spalding and Wilfred McClay, it kind of comes back to the concept that our national identity is guided by natural human rights. These pieces gravitate back toward the concept of natural human rights. And particularly in the Matthew Spalding Q&A, he talks about how those words are written into the Declaration of Independence, which is just 1,458 words. But throughout the book, throughout this issue, the writers reflect on natural law, natural human rights, the rights of individuals to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And this was foreign at the time in global countries. I mean, most nations were monarchies and oligarchies and had servitude class, and the consent of the governed, our ability to actually decide on our elected leaders and pass laws and have representative government, was a completely foreign concept. This all comes back to what they believed were God-given, creator-given natural laws that predated any monarch or king. And of course, this was all about fighting England. We have to remember, the context of the time. A lot of the problems that the founders had were with people like King George assuming that he had divine authority to exact whatever he felt he needed to exact on whoever he felt like he needed to.
Jeff, one of the things that comes up so often today is like, what would the founders think about or say about what's happening in America today? In fact, that came up in the article that you referenced. So let me throw this at you. I mean, obviously, you've done a deep dive into history here, and it's hard to figure out what people might be thinking, but obviously there's speculation. Can you share anything with us?
Yeah, I think that they would be, Spalding goes into this a little bit, but I think that they would be pleased with the way America has evolved from this. I mean, they were literally losing this war. There's no two ways about it. When they wrote the Declaration of Independence, they were losing this war, and every one of the people who signed it was destined to be hanged without question. They were bold, they were courageous, they did this. They would be pleased to know what America would become. They would probably be a little bit concerned, and Dr. Spalding goes into this, deeply worried about certain trends, and that is, sort of the gravitation away from our sense of self-government and our sense of individual responsibility. He brings up the point, and we certainly support this throughout the American Legion through our youth programs that promote citizenship and constitutional understanding and all that we need to do a better job of teaching what those founding values were. We need to do a better job of continuing to reinforce what were the basis. It guided the abolitionist movement during the Civil War, after the Civil War. It guided literally everything from Frederick Douglass to Martin Luther King. They all spoke about the founding values of our nation. And if we can remember those and reflect on those, maybe we could still find a good reason to love our nation.
There you go. I think we're talking about civics lessons here in high schools, and that's something that really needs to be brought back. There's no question about that. Jeff, I'm going to take a quick break. Jeff Stoffer, and in the next segment, Henry Howard will be joining us on behalf of the American Legion. It's a changing of the guard here. Jeff is taking a leave of absence. He's still going to be with the Legion, but he's going to be out in Idaho. Later in the show, we're going to check in with Rich Fiesta on behalf of the Alliance for Retired Americans. Doomsday. Some are saying doomsday for Social Security. Rich is going to talk about what lies ahead because the funds are running out. That story and more later on the show here on America's Workforce. Don't go away.
This is America's Workforce. More shows available at awfradio.com.
American workers are sick of struggling to get by. It's time to get ahead. In the Teamsters Union, workers are winning industry-leading contracts, historically high wages, fully paid health care, and retirement benefits you can count on. Across the country, Teamsters fight alongside our brothers and sisters to secure a better life. It's what we've been doing and how we've been living for more than a century. When we fight, we win. Join us. Be a Teamster.
America's Workforce is presented by the Laborers International Union of North America. Feel the power right now at liuna.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Communication Workers of America. You can find more at cwa-union.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the United Steelworkers. You can find more at usw.org.
America's Workforce appreciates our sponsor, the Columbus Central Ohio Building and Construction Trades Council, who represents more than 18,000 workers from 19 affiliated local unions and district councils.
Now, back to Ed Flash Ferens with America's Workforce.
And remember, you can check us out on at least 5 platforms, and that includes YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. And when you get an opportunity, here's what you do. Just sign up and receive our shows on a regular basis and give us a rating. Always appreciate those 5-star ratings, so please keep them coming. And if you miss a show, just go to awfpodcast.com, awfpodcast.com. We have everything archived there. And we appreciate you as a listener of this show. I've been doing this show, my God, started doing this back in 1998. The show actually originated in Cleveland, Ohio in 1993. And for the past 3 years, we're the #1 union podcast in America. We appreciate that. I always say it's because we bring good guests. And we're adding a new guest here starting at the end of next month, and that would be Henry Howard. Jeff Stoffer, why don't you explain again to our listeners what this transition is all about and how Henry's going to fill the role that you have created here on the show for so many years, going back to 2009.
Yeah, thanks, Flash. I'm happy to introduce and welcome, my friend and colleague, Henry Howard, who has been Deputy Director in the Media and Communications Division at American Legion National Headquarters for 14 years. A couple of things that Henry has led, I'm sure that you're aware of, and we've talked about his stories. He's written features across the country, all from a lot of the issues on mental health. He has led our Be the One initiative to reduce veteran suicide. And I think that you might remember that during COVID, when we were having our shows during that time, we had a little program called 100 Miles for Hope, which activated our members to do 100 miles of running or walking or fitness. And Henry was the absolute genius behind that program, which has evolved into the American Legion Family USA 250 Challenge, which is underway right now for the 250th anniversary. But Henry is a great colleague. He's a smart guy. He's a former newspaper editor, and now he has been with our division for 14 years. I'm happy to bring him on the show and to have him take over for me. He's taken over for me in a lot of other ways. It's in good hands. Everything's in good hands.
Well, Henry, welcome to the American Workforce family here. We appreciate what you're going to be doing. And I'll tell you, I'm glad that Jeff brought up the Be the One campaign, because we are very, very focused on mental health, making sure that everybody is safe. The Be the One campaign, my gosh, that's a great campaign. Veteran suicide, they've come down a little bit, but there's a long way to go. We'll definitely concentrate that. But I just want to let you know that on this show, this is a primary focus, because especially in the building trades, and I know you're partnered with the building trades, we've seen a ridiculously high suicide rate and male-dominated workforce there. Talking about a lot of injuries. You're talking about prescription drugs. You're talking about addiction. Sadly, there's something that we need to do about that. And this is a show to do it on, appreciate that. Why don't we just get into this article here? What unites the United States in the world of social media today? I mean, it's ridiculous. And I know some countries, I was just reading the other day about the UK. They want to ban it for, I believe, people under 15, 16, something like that, because it's gotten out of hand. And I think that's part of the problem. But why don't you share with us what this article is all about? Here we are trying to unite everybody on the 250th anniversary of this country, the birth of the United States. And, there's some issues that need to be addressed. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Henry.
Sure. Thank you, Flash, and thank you for the kind words, Jeff. It's an honor to have worked for you for 14 plus years, and I appreciate your friendship, mentorship, and everything you've done. So I will definitely miss you, but I'm looking forward to the challenges and taking over, including this monthly radio show. So I'm very excited about the opportunity. And Flash, you mentioned Be the One. Be the One is also going through a bit of a transition too. We have a new director who is going to oversee that, and so he's already working on kind of the next wave of what our Be the One mission will be. So that sounds like a great episode for another month coming soon. For the social media that you mentioned, as part of our 250th celebration in the July magazine, we have a story by Alan Dowd, who has written frequently for us, very strong writer on analytical things. And what he did in a story that's titled What Unites Us is really take a look at the social media vitriol that's also, we've seen that in maybe television pundits who are on one side of the political spectrum or the other, bloggers who are biased, and really just examined it with facts and really, tried to address the question, are we as divided as some would think that we are or say that we are? And he used some survey data. One of them that really struck me was about the freedom of the press. And he goes back to quote one of the founders, James Madison: "A popular government without popular information or the means of acquiring it is but a prologue to a farce or a tragedy, or perhaps both." This gets into the, ideals that the founders had about the press being free to report and to be critical of the government and to, be that watchdog of sorts. And even to this day, in this all this vitriol that we're seeing, still 77% of us believe that freedom of the press is, quote, extremely important. That kind of, illustrates that divide that we're seeing is a small minority on both sides. The vast majority of Americans still want the press to have a significant role in our democracy.
Henry, this is an interesting conversation because we've seen a lot of attacks on the press and the media in general. And it may be traditional media we're talking about that. I'm just wondering, I mean, you're a former newspaper guy. So you've seen when newspapers were very, very strong in this country. And if you go back, I mean, Jeff and I remember talking about Thomas Paine when he came out with Common Sense, which was exploded in its day. You think about how they were able to distribute that 250 plus years ago. But I'm just wondering if you could speak to the freedom of the press. And people want freedom of the press, but are they really getting it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that it's also, when we say the press or the media, that's very, very general. Nowadays, anybody can be a publisher. They can create their own website. They can put out information that doesn't necessarily have the fact checks and the standards and the ethics of journalism that those who went to journalism school or have worked on newspapers or even in broadcast outlets, have. It's more of an opinion, but it's morphed into where it's just information. And I think that's a critical point, that information is not necessarily vetted. It can be somebody's opinion based on who knows what. So I think it is important to have that press freedom where where we have journalists working today that will talk to both sides and will look at the facts and will look at documents and file, Freedom of Information Act requests to get the data that does show, what is happening. And I think that the decline of newspapers, and we've seen, many shut down, leaving news deserts throughout America, is really tragic. Those aren't the newspapers or the media outlets that are far right-wing or far left-wing. Those are community newspapers that wrote about what their city council did, or who their school board voted for, or what the American Legion Post is doing in your community to celebrate July 4th or Flag Day. Not having those is sad. And I think that's something that, and we are starting to see in some parts of America, in that even former journalists take over with Substacks or that kind of thing, which doesn't necessarily fully replace that fully operational news organization that was there for decades, centuries maybe. But it does help provide that community information on what they need to know about the movers and shakers in their community.
Yeah, we're talking about independent journalism today. And speaking of independence, I think this is a good way to kind of wrap up this conversation. I saw on the news yesterday about the rise of independents that are voting. And it's interesting because, many said, and it's pretty true, the Democrats have gone far to the right. The Republicans have gone far to the left. Where's everybody else? In the middle. And right now, the independents are running things, they're the ones that are voting, that are saying, well, you know what? I don't like what you're doing on this side. I don't like what you're doing on that side. I'm going to vote for the person that makes the most sense, or the issue that makes the most sense. And it's interesting. Here we are 250 years later, and and that's what's going on in America today. Jeff, I'm going to throw it back to you. Any parting words here? What moving forward? I appreciate once again everything that you have brought to the show here. And Henry, I definitely want to get the new person in the Be the One campaign. Like I said, we're focused on mental health, suicide prevention on this show. Okay. But Jeff, parting words. What do you think?
Flash, I just want to thank America's Workforce Radio and you guys and your audience. You guys are our audience too. Through the years, we've tried to talk a lot about career opportunities and transitions and the skilled trades for veterans, and the work that we're trying to do to auger veterans into those skilled trades and to move forward. We have good relationships with all the unions. I have been very, very honored to be on the show since 2009. It seems like we've traveled a lot of roads down this path, a lot of different magazines, and it has been my honor and privilege to run this media and communications division since 2007 when I began. But I am thrilled about my opportunity to pass the torch to Henry Howard, who will do a great job in my stead as I move into a new role.
Jeff Stoffer, the American Legion. Don't be a stranger, okay? Just because you're going out to Idaho, you can still connect with us, okay?
All right.
And Henry, thank you so much for joining us on the show today, and we'll be talking to you next month. Legion.org for complete updates. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Rich Fiesta on behalf of the Alliance for Retired Americans. Once again, you're listening to America's Workforce.
This is America's Workforce. More shows available at awfradio.com.
Founded in 1887, the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters represents the employees responsible for tirelessly constructing and maintaining the national rail system in America. For more than a century, the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees has proven they have what it takes to protect its members and meet the ever-changing challenges of the rail industry. Today, the BMWED continues to fight for job security, fair wages, better benefits, and safer, more modern work environments. For more information, please visit bmwe.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Heat and Frost Insulators Labor Management Cooperative Trust. Find out more at insulators.org/LMCT.
America's Workforce is sponsored in part by Boyd Watterson Asset Management, LLC. Find out more about our investment solutions tailored to meet the needs of Taft-Hartley funds at boydwatterson.com.
America's Workforce Radio is sponsored in part by the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, District Council 6, representing painters, glazers, drywall finishers, and sign and display industry workers. They remind you that belonging to a union is your right as an American.
It takes LiUNA to build North America's infrastructure. From roads and bridges to schools and skyscrapers, the men and women of LiUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, build the projects we depend on. From constructing the Freedom Tower on the site of the former World Trade Center to untangling Washington, D.C.'s congested interstate, LiUNA members do the work that matters. Find out what it takes to be built by LiUNA at liuna.org. That's liuna.org.
Now, back to Ed Flash Ferens with America's Workforce.
And remember, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. You know, right now in America, there's over 70 million people on Social Security. A lot of them, I'm sure a lot of them, are not aware of the fact that in a couple of years, and Rich is going to be specific on this, our guest right now is Rich Fiesta on behalf of the Alliance for Retired Americans. That group is going to see a pay cut, drastic pay cut, coming up in, 6 years, Rich, if nothing is done in Congress. Is that right?
Yep, sadly so. 2033, right around the corner.
So why don't you explain what's going on? I mean, let's go back to the 1980s when Reagan got involved in, preserving Social Security to where we are today. Is that basically the plan that is running out right now, running out of money? Is that right?
The plan was in 1983, they gradually raised the retirement age from 65 to 67. They raised the tax rate on withholding for up to now 6.2% for the employer and same for the worker. That was done. And the demographics and the actuaries were saying that this should be good for 75 or so years, because they projected birth rates, immigration rates, aging of the population, etc. And they got everything right except one factor, and that was wages would increase as productivity increased. And since the trickle down of the 80s, that hasn't happened. That average wages and incomes have not kept up with productivity, so people during the last 40 plus years have not been making the way they were in the 50s and 60s and 70s. So we're about 15 years early because of, frankly, the policies that started in the Reagan administration.
How about that? So what's going to happen here? What kind of cut are we looking at if nothing is done?
If nothing happens, Flash, the trustees would say starting in 2032, the trust fund, which now has over $3 trillion, but it's paying out rapidly because all the baby boomers are retiring. They knew that back in 1983. Mm-hmm. If nothing is done, then there will not be enough money going in every month that needs to be paid out. It's not like the trust fund goes to zero. There's just not enough to pay full benefits. So an average cut will be about 22% or $500 a month for the average beneficiary starting sometime in 2032.
So, Rich, if people are going to lose that amount of money, I mean, this is money that would go into the economy. That's going to have to have some kind of effect on the economy going forward, especially with 70 plus million people.
Yes, and it'll even be higher then. It'll be close to 80 million. Social Security benefits, you're right. They come in to your bank account and then they go out for your monthly expenses. That's not being put in a basket underneath your bed or the old mattress, as it were. They are spent. Social Security is a huge economic driver around our country, everywhere, urban, rural, suburban, rich, poor neighborhoods. So that will have a definite negative effect on the American economy.
So let's talk about what needs to be done here. You mentioned back in the 80s, they raised the retirement age. I think that's one of the things they're talking about now. You and I have had many conversations about scrapping the cap. There's a threshold here. I believe it's like $180,000 or something like that. After that, you don't contribute into Social Security. So we know we have a very divided Congress right now. Is anybody raising the alarm on what we're talking about?
Oh, yes. We at the Alliance for Retired Americans and others in labor and advocates have been banging the pots and pans for 20 years about this. First, there's good legislation that would raise that cap. As you mentioned, it's $184,000 this year, to either everybody pays in over time or put it back in for people over $250,000 a year or $400,000 a year. Senator Bernie Sanders has had a bill in on this on the Senate, along with Senator Brian Schatz has a bill to raise the cap, and you can increase benefits and make the trust fund stronger. Congressman John Larson in the House from Connecticut, he has been the leader there as well. But we need a Congress that is worker and retiree friendly, because the other side wants to raise the age even above 67, cut benefits, cut the COLA, and even do some privatization.
When it comes to raising the age, now you said it's 67. What do they want to raise it to?
Well, there are some real live members of Congress, Republicans, who are talking about raising it to 69 or 70, which would be the highest amongst all of our economic competitors in the world. It would be outrageous. We at the Alliance, we do polling almost every year on this. And the one thing that unites people, regardless of income, geography, political party, gender, race, is adamant opposition to raising the retirement age above where it is now.
So, Rich, let me ask you this. You mentioned there's some bills. I don't know what kind of traction those bills are getting. Hopefully, when people realize that, Social Security is going to get a haircut in less than 6 years, I mean, they got to be pounding the pavement, knocking on the doors of these legislators to try to get something done. What kind of traction are we talking about right now, Rich?
Well, with this administration and especially this Congress, none, because there are Republicans who want to raise the age and as they could cut benefits, and they control the Congress. This is why politics and elections matter. Taking back the House, which I think has a better than 50% chance, and actually potentially the Senate too, which is getting close to having a better than 50% chance here in the summer, is step number one, because we have bills that are ready by Senators Sanders and Schatz and Congressman Larson in the House. We know this. The actuaries at Social Security, and they are neutral and they haven't been touched yet by Trump, give us the numbers, every year and halfway through the year. So we know what the problem is and we know what the solution is. We need the people in Congress to do it.
Now, one thing that the Alliance does well is educate the members as to how our lawmakers, our elected officials are voting on issues just like this. So I'm just wondering, have you updated the website, retiredamericans.org? So-and-so lawmaker in Minnesota, how he or she is voting or has been voting when it comes to issues on Social Security. Is that updated right now?
Yes, go to our website, retiredamericans.org, and we have every annual voting record going all the way back to 2001 through 2025 up there, and we do 10 votes a year in the House and Senate on retiree issues. Sometimes we have a lot of Social Security votes, Medicare votes, prescription drugs, voting rights. Because of who's in charge, we haven't had that, but we have a lot of votes on spending to make sure that the Social Security Administration is fully funded and has enough people to take care of its customers, for example. So look at our website. We rank people. Make your decisions off of that when you go to the polls.
Rich, one more thing here before we button it up. The word entitlement. I'm sure that really bothers you because there's so many in Washington say, oh, this is an entitlement. And what we have to keep pounding in on shows like this is, it's your money. This is your money. This is the money that you and your employer contributed over your work life. And it's not an entitlement. Is that getting through at all right now?
More and more, because we're shouting from the rooftops and we're visiting the offices and we're writing op-eds and going on programs like yours, Flash, that yes, Social Security and a good part of all of Medicare too comes out of every paycheck, our money into a trust fund. Even the people who work at the Social Security Administration are paid out of the trust fund. And it is our money, and we earn those benefits. They're guaranteed, and there's a right to have them when you reach retirement age.
So right now, just to go back to what we're talking about, if Congress does nothing, the Social Security Trust Fund will only be able to pay 78% of scheduled benefits to all current and future beneficiaries. And we're talking 2032. I mean, it's right around the corner, 2032, actually 2033. But 2032 is when everything runs out. Yeah. And there's going to be a huge pay cut for so many 70 plus, maybe at that time, 80 million Americans, which is a big chunk of the United States of America. It's sad that we have to talk about this as we celebrate the 250th anniversary of this country. Hopefully something will get done. Here's the website that you want to go to, retiredamericans.org. Lots of good information there, retiredamericans.org. Rich, hang in there. We'll talk to you next month, okay, brother?
Great being with you as always, Flash.
And that'll be it for another edition of America's Workforce. Coming up at the show on Monday, we're going to talk all about mental health with an organization called Carillon and what they're doing about it. Until then, all of you have a safe and wonderful weekend.
That concludes another episode of the America's Workforce Radio Podcast. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. America's Workforce is a production of Labor Tools and BMA Media Group. Find out more information online at labortools.com.